Thank you, women of Whistler, coming here tonight. And also a big shout out and thank you to the men of Whistler. You're brave. I'm grateful that you've all come out this evening for this special event. This is actually my first time at a Women of Whistler event. I'm sure it won't be my last. And I was really excited when my Vancouver 2010 dear friend, Cindy Coughlin, where are you, Cindy? Suggested my name to come and speak at this time. I think it's kind of, the stars kind of aligned, because what I'm sharing with you tonight is going to be emblematic of what I think we need to do more of in this very critical decade. But before I start, and I just have to acknowledge, because I'm having like this love gush right now, because not only is my dear husband, who I adore, and my eldest stepdaughter, who I can't even look at her, I'm gonna cry, is here tonight, but also family members, in-laws, my dear sister, and Vancouver 2010 colleagues. Can you just put your hands up? We've got like some warriors in the room. Any volunteers for the Vancouver 2010 gig? We've got volunteers in the room. You know that expression, the blue jackets? You guys rocked. Can you believe that it's been 10 years tomorrow when we welcomed the world to Vancouver? The last torchbearer came running into the opening ceremonies, and it all began 10 years ago. So tonight I'm going to do this kind of time-lapse arc between what all happened to prepare for the 2010 Games. It was a 10-year effort, 3 years for the bid committee. You were there, Tina Simcoe, Stephanie, and then 7 years to mount and deliver great games, extraordinary games experience with lasting legacies. So I'm going to pull from some of those stories, as well as a few other things that I've done in my career and life to help paint a picture around what's possible, what might be interesting, inspiring, and in fact important to think about for this next 10 years. Now more than ever, humanity is being called to wake up, to see the impact of our ways on this earth. We have degraded every ecosystem on the planet, from the oceans to wetlands and forests, the air we all breathe, and far too many plants and animals. Our next decade is critical. Climate change is happening at an unprecedented rate. We need to change our ways on a local and global level. Change can be uncomfortable, yet it is also an opportunity to start fresh and create something new. It can be exciting. When we respectfully engage with First Nations, we tap into thousands of years of original wisdom, deep culture, and traditional knowledge. When we study what the environment needs to thrive, we all benefit from nature's life-giving services, like a more balanced climate, clean air, clean water, and an abundance of biodiversity. When we collaborate with our supply chain and look at the alignment of our partnerships, we can ignite new solutions and spark economic prosperity. Sport is the stuff of dreams. When we play, train, and compete, we discover what we are made of and what is possible. The pride we feel when witnessing excellence and prowess is an elixir for feeling joy, feeling alive. I believe we can tap into extraordinary and inspiring new ideas, new dreams, and new realities. I believe that deep down, we all want to do the right thing, to be healthy, care for our families, work hard, support our communities, and be good stewards with Mother Nature. Thank you. So my goals for you all tonight is to arm you with ideas and inspiration and practical tools in ways that can inspire you to consider what is your climate action plan for this next decade, because it's going to take all of us in a much more mighty way. And I want to really kind of pull out and tease out practical things that can evolve over the next 10 years, but that are within our reach to get started. How many of you have climate action in your personal life goals as something you think about every day? Oh, okay, you're my friends, awesome. How many of you have it in your strategic business plans for your organizations, or you're contemplating about building one for this year, for this decade? Come on, you. There we go. Okay, good. Awesome. Good. Okay, so what I'd like to do is speak for about 40 minutes and then field about 30 minutes of questions with you, and then we can enjoy a reception afterwards. But I'd like for you to feel that at the end of tonight, you have a sense of, actually, I can set a really bold goal, even if I don't know exactly how I'm going to do it from the beginning. And for any of us that were involved in the Vancouver 2010 Games, we know what that looks like, right? John Furlong would say, put it on the map, and things can conspire to help make that happen, right? Second is, I want to, it's kind of timely, the beginning of the year, some of us do a bit of a cleanse and a bit of recovery from Christmas. So I wanted to play with that concept and explore how we can do a carbon cleanse in our business, but in a way that also brings social and economic benefits. And finally, I want to explore and talk about some of the benefits of thinking about unusual partnerships that can spark innovation and shared success. More is better than one, and how that can play out. In order for me to understand who's who in this room, I just want to ask, and I'll play this back to you later in my talk. How many of you were born before 1965? All right, we're the baby boomers, the late boomers, okay? We're the boomers, yes, excellent. So we make up, our club makes up about 9.6 million Canadians in our country. Okay, so how many of you were born between 1965 and 1980? Excellent, you guys are the Gen X. You make your club is 7.2 million Canadians in Canada. How many of you were born between 1980 and 1995? You are the Gen Y, you are the millennials. Oh my God, I love you. Can I just say, and there's people in this room who where's Jacqueline? There's Jack, okay. You guys, and there's Jesse. You guys, I think there's like, my inner soul is a millennial, like I just don't even worry about my age, how many of you were born between from 1995 onwards? So you're the Gen Zs. My Lucy, my little stepdaughter, anybody else? Oh, you're brave, honey, sweetheart. Okay, can I just say, okay, so back up, sorry, Gen Y millennials, you make up 10 million Canadians. You are 27.5 of our national population. And Lucy's generation, and my nieces and nephews, of which my sister's son is one of them, we make up, or they make up, our kids make up 9 million Canadians. So affectionately referred to as the majority minority. So for us as business leaders and community leaders, but particularly for this audience, business leaders, our landscape is going to change big time in the next 10 years, right? Consumer interests, voting interests, values and preferences, they're gonna rocket. If any of us, I know that our second youngest son was part of a grade 10 election process just in advance of our last national election. And in British Columbia alone, if all the grade 10 votes that participated in a mock election stuck, we would have had a Green Party in our province. So this is coming up, right? So I just want to lay that on the floor for us to think about as we move forward, and I'm going to get all my stuff organized here. There we go. So those are the goals we'll cover. And then we're going to do some time traveling in this talk. So back in 2000, that's when the bid for the Vancouver 2010 Games started. And my friend Tina and Stephanie are here tonight. There were we used to get staff numbers, and they had single-digit staff numbers because they were part of the bid way back when. And when we think about what was the temperature and the mood of Vancouver and Whistler and BC and Canada about contemplating a mega sport event like the Olympics, it wasn't all entirely friendly. There was protests, there was concerns around how much is this going to cost, and how is this money going to be allocated, and how do we do right by the environment? How do we do right by First Nations and have meaningful participation of First Nations in our country? How do we think about social inclusion for those that don't typically benefit from these large, big, elite mega events? And we heard a lot of it. And some of us were involved in that stakeholder engagement way back then. That ended up informing our mandate of what it would take to win the support to then win a plebiscite, and eventually move on and win the right to host the 2010 Games in June of 2003. I joined the Games at the beginning of January 2006, and that mandate became all of our mandate for the Olympics and the Paralympics. The issues of the time then are not dissimilar to some of the issues now, except one has bumped up and has overshot all of it, and it's no surprise, it's climate change. And what I am interested in is how we were able to garner support by engaging with a myriad of stakeholders and use this input to inform our plan. And I think for businesses right now, when we feel overwhelmed, I think any of us in the room want to do the right thing, right? But each of you know your business best. So how do we add a layer of climate action into our business? Sometimes it can feel utterly overwhelming. If not now, when and how? Where do I begin? And it sounds like some of you are already started in some elements of climate action. I'm hoping I'm reminding you of the good things you're already doing, but also I'm hoping I can impart some new things that we can consider as well. So when we look back in time, we're going to do some time traveling back in our time here. Between 2000 and 2010, not only were these issues of how much are the games going to cost and how do we make it socially inclusive for those that haven't typically benefited from the games, and how do we have a lighter footprint when we host the games. The whole field of sustainability was really coming to the front. And what we see then was something that was informing how we would shape our games. So in fact, our games really set a new bar for the Olympic movement. 196 countries on the planet, actually 195 countries in the United Nations, 196 countries in the Olympic movement. That's how much we love sport on this planet. Got to see what it looks like to have an integrated lens where we're going to deliver extraordinary games, and we're going to think about in a very focused way, targeted way, about our environmental impacts and opportunities like low waste, low carbon, and how we tread lightly, especially in our mountain habitats. How we're going to take care of the people in communities that can be negatively impacted by mega sport events, especially people of the inner city, especially vulnerable populations, and how we can spur and drive economic development in our region in a way that the value of this investment and the time and the volunteerism and the partnerships can be enjoyed in our local region. When the 2010 Games finished, we've had this subsequent a massive decade where the field of sustainability has evolved. It started as something called sustainable development, then sustainability, and now we use terms in the last decade like corporate social responsibility, ethical investment, social impact, positive net impact, all of this. So the profession is helping to support actually a greater call for action. And now we're in this radical new decade. It's going to be a whopper, right? And it's going to change again in terms of how we dial in this sustainability thinking into our business plans, into our community plans, and into our personal lives. So as Theresa mentioned, so I'm on the late side of 50s, 30 years in my career. Born in Calgary with my sister, university in geography and environmental studies, and then moved to Switzerland and worked for WWF International, the Worldwide Fund for Nature, the international organization, in education and communications, and then came back to Vancouver in 1994 and had my own little consulting practice, and then moved my way up to VP Sustainable Development for CH2M Hill, a then national engineering project delivery firm, and it was there that I was recruited to help the Vancouver 2010 Games, which was really definitely a personal highlight in my profession. And then in the last 10 years after the Games, I formed my own company again, the Ann Duffy Group, and I help future Olympic and World Cup bids and organizing committees plan their sustainability and legacy plans. And then I met this one in 2015, and I inherited this one and her 3 siblings, and things kind of changed, right? Lucy's going to graduate from grade 12 this year, and our eldest is having, yes, a gap year. We feel that too. Our eldest is having a gap year and repositioning for his career, and both have whispered in their own ways, you know, Anne, I wish it was like when you were 19 and I didn't have to feel the heavy weight of the life I'm living into. And obviously that struck a chord with me, and I know there's other moms in the room and parents and grandparents in the room where it's like, okay, we've got to change this up. And am I prepared to do a few things that are uncomfortable and new in a different way? And in fact, yes, obviously. So one of the things that I'm excited to explore, and I've already had conversations with this community in Whistler, is how do we mount a community collaborative collective to launch a kick-ass climate action plan for the next 10 years, so that by 2030 we can look back at this moment and say, we woke up even more, we came together in new and wonderful ways, and we mobilized and made change for an international tourism destination that people notice and that this community can feel loud and proud about. So that's what I'm up to. Heather from the RMOW is in the room, she's in. We've got Melissa with the Chamber is in. I've talked to other friends who are owning businesses and others, and community champions and the young people, because you guys are so crazy smart. It's not about me, but I'm excited to help get this started because this is my jam. This is what I do now. So I'll reveal more of this as I go through the talk. So when we talk about, okay, Anne, what does a roadmap for climate action 2.0 look like for this decade? I'm going to unpack some concepts. I'm just going to check in. Some of you probably know most of this, but I just want to make sure that we're coming from a level playing field. This was our mantra at Vancouver 2010, and Cindy Tripp is in the room. Where are you, Cindy? There she is over there. So Cindy helped lead the training and the human resources of the workforce. When we went from 0 to 1,400 staff, paid staff, and 50,000 volunteers. And this one was involved in helping the paid staff get armed, get trained up to do their work such that all of us had elements of sustainability in our job description, our performance evaluation, and our life story of what we did around sustainability for the game. So I know she'll remember this, but generally when we talk about sustainability, it's this triumvirate between the integration of environmental impacts and opportunities, so air, land, water, critters, pollution and things, as well as society, so human rights, ethical conduct, community impacts, social responsibility, accessibility, education and training. And then we get to the economy, which is about jobs and business development and trade and our supply chain and whatnot. What has changed in towards the end of this last decade, and what is going to be our mantra in how we inform our planning for this next decade, is that we've got to change up our circles. Okay, you've all heard about it takes how many planets to actually resource our consumption patterns. We've got to dial this back. So we start with, what is the carrying capacity of the environment? What does Mother Nature need? She does a lot for us, but what does she need to thrive and regenerate? So when we follow the science and we follow the carrying capacity of the ecosystems and environmental services on the planet, those are our boundaries, those are our guidelines, and we do that first. I'll talk more about why this is so important this decade. Then we look at societal needs and interests. What do human beings among nature's species and the environment, what do we need to thrive? And now that I've come later in life to become a step parent, it's so much less about me, and it's so much more about my stepchildren and my nieces and my nephews, and I've got grandparents in my family who are here tonight as well, is we have to go back to the long shot of looking at the needs and interests of future generations. How does that impact our decision making today? So, again, climate change. I'm assuming most of you probably know the high notes of what climate change is, but just so we're all speaking off the same page. God bless the sun, radiates energy to the earth, and that energy creates heat and light, supports photosynthesis. We have this atmospheric layer on the planet. It's our insulation and our filter. But if we produce more if we combust more fossil fuel, then nature can reintegrate. We start heating up the planet. And since 1750, the age of industrialization, we've warmed up the temperature 45%, such that now we're in this tricky situation. Would have been great if we started earlier, but we're here, February 2020. And we have this goal of reducing global warming back to only, how do I explain it in the easiest way? That we could only increase our average global warming by 1.5% if we want to have the environmental ecosystems do their function. If we don't, we're going to have more of Australia and more of the Amazon and more of the coral reefs and more of the dust bowls and all of that. So that's the math. Those are the parameters that nature says, this is how I work, right? I can filter pollution, I can convert carbon dioxide to air, but I can only do it at a certain rate. And we're combusting fossil fuels at a rate that nature can't re-assimilate. That's just bare facts, right? So when we look at how we start mobilizing and up-leveling our effort, as I mentioned earlier, there's 196 countries on the planet, 19 countries, including Canada and all the European Union countries in Europe, make up 78% of our carbon dioxide emissions. So we can do the math and say, if we're going to win this game, we've got to load up on the have countries, and we've got to do our part, right? And we have a decade to basically shift this, right? And before last fall in the election, Canada was 15% over its target of greenhouse gas emissions. And then just before the election, the Liberals brought in a pan-Canadian climate action framework. If we actually implement it, and if they stick with the program that is meant to be stuck with, we might have a chance of meeting our own goals in union with our municipalities, our communities, our provinces, and the like. So that's just the basic facts. Like, we can argue about this, but that's the science. So how do we get started in this? How do you as business owners say, okay, you know what, I may be open to up-leveling my climate action strategy as part of our business plan or our long-term strategic plan? How do I get started? And really where we begin is how you can engage with your own network. When we talk about your network, some of us use the word stakeholder engagement, but really it's your network, it's your people. As business owners, there's people in your team. It might be a small team, it might be a larger team. There's people in there's community partners who you help and collaborate with to deliver your services. There's your clients and your customers, those that you want to serve and serve well. And then there's your supply chain. All of those people and organizations that you purchase products and services to do your business. This engagement can start off informally. She talks about it's always important to start a conversation. I'm just lapsing on her name. It's high, late 50s. Conversations can start informally, and in these conversations is where you find like-minded spirits that want to be part of this. And then one can expand further and have more formal engagement in the room where you workshop and you have conversations with your supply team, with some of your community partners, with your emblematic customers. And you start seeing what are some of the issues, what are the critics saying, and that really helps inform what a future integrated plan can look like. How many of you were in Whistler in the early 2000s? Alrighty, great. So I don't know if you remember, Mayor Hugh O'Reilly used to ski with Dr. Karl Henrik Robert, a Swede. He's snowboarding, but that's okay. And he is sort of the founding father of the natural step. He's a scientist, and he created a coalition with other scientists to really come up with 4 universal system conditions that we can all agree on, that this is how nature operates, and from there we need to then figure out how we organize our society and our economy. Anyway, it was through skiing that Dr. Karl-Henrik Robert came from Sweden, worked with Mayor O'Reilly and the resort municipality Whistler, and this collective happened beyond the municipality. Whistler Blackcomb, the library, Aware, Whistler Naturalists and whatnot, got into having conversations to say, yeah, you know, what does our 20-year horizon in 2000 look like for 2020? So we had this collective effort, and that informed our official community plan. At the time when I was VP of Sustainability with CH2M, we were helping this planning process, so I knew of it well. What came out of it was a number of companies in this town, from PhotoSource to Zip Trek, as well as Whistler Blackcomb and the municipality, that adopted the principles of the natural step and really used that to inform their long-term strategy. Our hoteliers, do we have anybody from the Fairmont here tonight? Yes, you guys rock. Okay, can I just tell you a fun story there? So early in the 2000s, I was involved with the Canadian Hotel Association that launched the Green Key program. So it was a certification program for your green hotel program. It's since grown and developed far beyond what we started with. But it's now like the STAR program. If you go to a 5-star hotel, excellent service. If you want to go to a Green Key,
Just got 5.
You got 5. Yeah. Awesome. Can you guys give these guys a applause? That's amazing. Okay. So that's Fairmont around the globe, right? So that's operational efficiency, that's employee engagement, that's working with your supply chain. And they were one of the first early adopters of this whole green hotel movement. So what's exciting is that this kind of activity that is emblematic of what we need to do more of this decade was birthed here and across the country in the early 2000s. As well, we all love our Whistler Library, and later the permanent venues of the Whistler Olympics, or the Whistler Olympic venues, where we really mobilized on green buildings and facilities. So leadership in energy and environmental design, certification, that really looked at how we source the materials for our buildings, as well as other social interests. How do we establish multi-purpose venues that make sense for the community long-term? So this kind of thinking, this is where I get to nerd out just for a minute. So one of the things that we developed at Vancouver 2010 was the Sustainability Management and Reporting System, which was really, I often felt like, and Tina and Stephanie can recall this, I often felt like I was kind of like the maestro, the conductor of an orchestra, where can we sing and play music from the same song sheet, but the trumpets in event services and the clarinets in food and beverage, and the, give me another instrument, violins from building and construction or purchasing or whatever, had their part to do around achieving our sustainability goals. So in order to do that, we had to have an overriding kind of management and planning process. That was something that we developed in our games. Something that came out of this effort was looking at, okay, how do we formalize a process for engaging with our network? How do we plan specific objectives and targets that we can revisit and change if we need to, but that's going to be our North Star for this year, and we'll adjust. And then how do we do or implement our operational procedures, our programs and initiatives, our staff training, our environmental management plans, our health and safety plans, our supply chain or purchasing processes. And then how can we check, how does that work? So maybe we do some quarterly checking, and we can do some mid-course correction within that year. And then at the end of the year, we look at, well, how did we do with that? This is a dynamic process, and can we improve and reset for the next year? This template ended up birthing Canada's first Sustainable Event Management Sustainable Event Management Standards in 2010 with the Canadian Standards Association. It became an input to the international standard for sustainable event management. So whether we think about sustainability of business meetings and conventions, or festivals and cultural events and concerts, or sport events, we now have a song sheet that we can build on and improve in terms of how to integrate sustainability thinking into our work. So let's hone in on this big challenge for this decade. So like I said, January, February, we think about our cleanse, which is where we get rid of the stuff that bogs us down, that costs money, that can be a risk, that can be a problem. And we focus more on the things that are clean and lighter and renewable. Basically, that's kind of the concept. The process that not only Vancouver 2010 deployed, but that many companies and many organizations that get on this program think about is a four-part process. So first of all, you need to measure your own carbon footprint. You can do this at your home. You can look at the electricity spend for your home or your business, the heating and ventilation and air conditioning associated with your buildings and facilities. You can look at materials in terms of the packaging that you bring into your business and the resource use and the waste diversion. You can look at business travel and transportation. You can look at staff commuting and your shipping and logistics. You can look at your fleets. You can also look at your air travel. And you can also consider the behavior change of what you're trying to do in your in those activities. Secondly, in the case of Vancouver 2010, we did the math with the help of very smart people, far smarter than me and us, thinking of our UBC friends, to help do the math to understand what was our carbon footprint if we did nothing. Okay, so if we did nothing, we would have generated 268,000 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent in terms of greenhouse gas emissions for 7 years of planning and staging the games, as well as staff commuting, as well as business travel of the staff, as well as the footprint of athletes and officials coming to our event. Why? Because without the athletes and officials, there is no Olympic Games. So that was something we said, we really got to embrace this part of our footprint. I want to flag that because I think this could be one of the big, hairy, audacious goals that our community collective on climate action for this decade. I have no idea exactly how we fully solve it, but I know when you put that on your North Star as a goal, in 10 years we'll probably figure something out. For us to enjoy the tourism and the economic prosperity that we have, it necessarily relies on tourists coming by air travel to our destination. So let's giddy up and figure out how we can work with other partners near and far to bring that number down. Okay, so then second, once you know what your business as usual carbon footprint is, then you start looking for reductions. I'm going to give some examples of the various things that we did with the Olympics, but that's looking at where can we be more energy efficient, what kinds of things can we, that we have control over in our decision making, that we can do in our business and operations to reduce those emissions. I can say that for Vancouver 2010, when we did this process, I'll give some examples in a minute, we were able to reduce our emissions profile by 18%. For the emissions that we can't further offset, because we're still in transition to this green carbon economy, there's this thing called offsets, right? And climate change gives a rip about national boundaries. Air moves around, emissions move around everywhere. So offsets is this collective agreement that we can have certified projects that invest and innovate on technology and renewable energy solutions with social and economic benefits. And for that, we can register a certain number of renewable energy credits in lieu of our carbon emissions that we can't further reduce. So it's a way to zeroing out our books. Okay, and I'll talk a little bit more about that going forward in terms of an example that we employed within our games. Finally, is once we do the work under the waterline, when we've looked in our own mirror, we've looked in our own operations, we can move forward and engage and brand the heck out of this with our partners, with our clients, with our customers, as something around this is what we stand for and this is what we've done. And so whether that's looking at how people within the organization, whether it was VANOC or our businesses or our sponsors, can do their part, whether it was working with sponsors or government partners, we all looked inwards, did our math, did our homework, did our reductions, did our offset, and then we could engage even more externally about this is what we're aiming to do, this is what we're achieving, these are some of the stories. I will say it was a project I was involved with my team we thought, there's the carrot and the stick. Really, if you're going to come, we're so grateful we get sponsors and government partners to help us deliver this enormous thing called the Olympics. But we're not a regulator, right? But we have this sustainability thing in our DNA, in our vision and mission. So we can only offer carrots, not sticks, right? So our carrot is, we get a lot of attention because people love to watch the Olympics and the Paralympics. And in return for the attention that we can redirect to you, the sponsors and the government partners, we will point to the cool innovations that you've done that are games related, and then you can go and brand that and communicate that with your marketing, with your people. So the whole thing around how do we recognize great efforts along the way ended up becoming something that I personally didn't imagine that we would have as much output as a result of that. I thought maybe we'd get 20 innovations. By by December of 2009, we had 62 innovations by our international sponsors, domestic sponsors, government partners, and our own organizing committee. Because we put that carrot out there, we put that incentive out there to say, we'll help recognize. We had a specific mark, it was called the Sustainability Star, it was a cool little emblem. And we ended up being sort of this demonstration site of sustainability in action, which then authentically supported, not greenwashing, but authentically supported branding and communication around how these sponsors were supporting and partners were supporting the shared vision of our games. I just read a stat in preparation for this talk that 80% of pro and major sport consumers in the US, UK, France, China, and Brazil think that major sport events like FIFA and the Olympics and other sport events need to take ecological issues seriously and to have greater account for their impact on the environment. In 2018, the United Nations launched a Sport for Climate Framework program, and we're seeing already this sort of incentive recognition process happening at a global level. So I want to share some tips and tools for you guys. 3 that are probably my favorites. Number 1 is my most favorite. So Elizabeth Sheehan at the climatesmartbusiness.com is really your help desk. This is a resource. We used to say, how do we figure this out? It's like, well, there's an app for that. So climatesmartbusiness.com is, they're based in Vancouver. They've helped 800 companies in British Columbia get started. They work to provide training, software, support, certification along the way. I did see in late March that there's an online webinar series to help support some of us that are out of town in terms of how we can apply this. Elizabeth is very excited to be part of our community collaborative climate action kick-ass effort for this decade. So more to follow on this, but for now, if you're just curious, how do I even figure out my business's carbon footprint or my own home carbon footprint? That's a good place to go. Second is carbon zero. So I've talked in my video in the beginning, and I can chat a little bit more when I talk about some of these projects, that humanity really needs to do some heavy lifting on changing how we use energy and the kind of emission profile we create. But nature can do a whack load for us. When we plant trees, when we rehabilitate wetlands and land that has been disturbed from human activity, nature picks up the rest. She converts carbon dioxide into oxygen, and she provides habitat for biodiversity and all of that. So when we look for offset projects or things that can help shore up carbon reductions and nature's capacity, Carbon Zero is an awesome place to find out more. And lastly, I'm going to talk about some companies in Whistler that have also adopted this. In the last 10 years, as I said, the field of sustainability has evolved, and there's this thing called B Corps. And these are benefit corporations that have instilled in their governance bylaws, in their strategic planning, in the core of their DNA, a commitment to be economically prosperous. Come on in, you guys, if you need chairs. There's a few on the side. And to kind of start this journey of let's do the math of what's our environmental impact, what is our social impact, what is our economic impact, and what can we do to improve it. I'll share with you a few companies that you'll recognize that are already are on this. And again, there's virtual support, and then there's workshop and facilitated support for businesses. Okay, this is one of my favorite parts. Some of the stories. Story-based communications was a big part of our way of balancing all the technical and policy things that we did to integrate sustainability into the delivery of our games. And Stephanie is here from Vancouver. She was part of our communications team to translate the nerdy technical language that people like Tina and I worked on and make it accessible for the public. So this was one of our favorite stories. I know it's an asset that probably all of you know and love, and that's Whistler Olympic Park. When we won the bid, we got a chance to kind of reconcile, so is this the best solution? And with pressure from Aware and Whistler naturalists and other stakeholders in Whistler, we thought, can we drive our footprint even smaller for the biathlon, cross-country, and ski jump venues? And we were able, in fact, to put our heads together and figure out a way to make the venue even more compact by 35%. What does that mean? That's less trees to cut, that's less land to disturb. Frankly, it's better for the spectator experience because they're seeing the networks of trails closer, whether it's cross-country or biathlon or ski jump. We had an amazing partnership with the Lillooet First Nations. And I mentioned earlier in the video about how do we have meaningful and authentic engagement with First Nations. So there's 4 First Nations whose territories the games occurred on. The Squamish, the Lillooet, the Tsleil-Waututh, and the Musqueam. And in the Whistler corridor, it was the Squamish and the Lillooet First Nation. And so the 4 host First Nations society was planned out in the bid phase to say, should we win, we understand that there will be agreements for environmental, economic, and social development. We're not just going to be up there at the opening ceremonies with headdresses. We are on the board, we are in the planning, we are in the delivery, and it was mighty, it was amazing. And so one of the decisions we had control and influence over was who's going to help construct and clear the site for the road and the trails to make the Whistler Olympic Park. And we thought, well, we have control over that decision. Let's invite a joint venture between an established construction company and an Aboriginal-owned construction company. And what is now called the Lillooet Construction Enterprises, their different name earlier, they were invited to cooperate with an established construction company, and they helped clear the roads, helped prepare the trails, helped prepare the sites. They did amazing work. They got follow-on work. And as a result of that, 18 months later, they reversed seasonal unemployment in the Mount Currie Nation. So this isn't, what was interesting for me to see is like, oh, this is in the realm of possibility of what I can direct. I wish more of our First Nation community business members were at this evening. I did invite some, but we have this amazing asset at the Squamish Lillooet Cultural Center and others. I talked to Kerry Mahaffey, and he is so jazzed about how we can find better pathways of connecting with the culture and capacity of our First Nation community members. One story that I can't miss because she was in the video. Tina was our person for the environmental management program in Whistler. And we had this climate goal of being able to, Tina, you gotta wave your hand because someone's whistling over here and it's like, she rocks.
Big fan.
Okay, big fan. Like, what number were you at the bid? She was the 5th person, okay, of 1,400 by the end of the games. Anyway, Tina worked with the venue directors and planners and managers to find ways to how could we reduce our carbon footprint. And collectively, they got their heads together and they had to trim some trees and cut some wood. They ended up chipping the wood on site, so we didn't have to truck it to some landfill. They composted it in mulch along with endemic species and wildflowers, and then respread it on the area. So it was things like this that everybody, like the venue team was like, yes, that's our climate action story. We're so loud and proud about that, and that was such a win for that venue. One of my other favorite venues is the Richmond Olympic Oval. It was originally supposed to be at SFU. After the bid, we understood that Richmond would be an even better place for this new venue. We built it for the long term in mind. It needed to be a long track speed skating oval for 17 days of the Olympics, but then afterwards, this place converts to hockey rinks, volleyball, rugby, basketball, accessible volleyball, basketball, high performance training center, meeting and convening space, and the like. The waste heat from the rinks generate heat for the venue afterwards. And the climate story not only is related to how we manage the heat, but we have 1.1 million board feet of pine beetle affected wood in the roof. And that wood is kind of emblematic of our new the new state of our forestry sector. Winters aren't cold enough and long enough. Pine beetles infest the wood. We get these blue stripes in the wood, but the wood's still good. So we showcase, like, this is the evolution of some of our wood products in our province. So for any of us contemplating green buildings and facilities and site planning, there's a couple of stories there. Probably the biggest lever for what I imagine most of you are small to medium-sized enterprises is how you can lean in hard on your partnerships with others to collaborate, and certainly in your sourcing. So this is just a small example of a program that we developed with our suppliers called Buy Smart. And we had a lens for every purchasing decision we made with the games. We had a lens for what could be environmentally relevant. So if I'm developing flower bouquets for the 1,700 flower bouquets that the athletes that make the podium will receive, how can that have an environmental or economic or social element? In fact, again, that was a decision we could put out to the market for a joint venture where we had an established florist work with a social enterprise. The social enterprise trained women that were victims of violence, fresh out of prison, new immigrants, people with accessibility challenges, to learn the art of flower arranging to make their bouquet. So this is an example of how we could bring in people that typically don't benefit from the whole parade of putting on the Olympics to be part of what it took to stage our games. The First Nations design on the medals, Susan Point, she was amazing, helped to design the medals. The metal for the medals included a portion of recycled, what we call urban ore. So metal discarded from cell phones and computers and things. Just another example would be how some of the, what we call overlay, or the temporary wooden materials that we needed to stage the games, was really came to life in a most powerful way with our partner Rona, who were all over this. And we needed a place, we needed a warehouse where we could build podiums, ramps, railings, and things. And they partnered again with the government partner and a social enterprise that trained at-risk young youth looking to upskill to get into the workforce, young Aboriginal adults in the Vancouver area, including women, new immigrants, to get their level 1 of a carpentry Red Seal program. So for a series of about 24 weeks, they learned math, how to show up on time, do carpentry, and they helped prepare and build the podiums, ramps, railings, and things that we needed. So it's just, I love these examples because they're ones that show, okay, you know, there's ways we can weave this in given our own decision making. Back to the staff engagement piece. I know that it's a real problem to keep good staff in Whistler. I'm not sure if this entirely translates. I think it would. Something that we worked on, because we had this range of demographics coming into our own organizing committee, in order for people to feel really excited about what we were trying to achieve in the games, we had to make their personal professional mission for their time working with the Olympics to include sustainability in their work. How we did that was in 2006 when I first arrived. The board and the senior vice presidents had to have a sustainability commitment relevant to their division in their performance plan and performance evaluation plan. And we figured it out together around what that would mean. Every staff person, so whether I was food and beverage or sport and events or other things, each person had an element of sustainability that was relevant to their work. So Kevin in logistics came up with the coolest way to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by finding every way possible to get stuff to our venues by rail. He also came up with some magical tracking process that we were able to apply to track our greenhouse gas emissions. That ended up being a best practice that future games have owned. Michelle, who worked in licensing and merchandising, she was my person that basically figured out our sustainable sourcing program for licensees and merchandise. Tina, of course, was our environmental management guru for all our Whistler events in terms of, or venues in terms of how we could coordinate with the venue managers and our community partners. And there certainly were many more. So I want to share that it's not just the Olympics that have been up to this stuff in the last while. We have brands that have presence in our own community that are waking up to, how do I do my part in my business to address environmental and social needs and interests, but really start leaning hard on climate action. And in these strange partnerships, just like some of the examples that I've given to you earlier, organizations like Patagonia and Arc'teryx, which have been partnering with the Pembina Institute. They are an environmental and energy policy think tank. They work closely at the oil and gas sector to help transition to a low carbon economy and others. David Suzuki Foundation with, I think it's Arc'teryx, Top Tables, so Barroso, Araxi, Il Caminetto, doing a lot of work not only with David Suzuki Foundation but other social and environmental, organizations. Origin, this awesome marketing firm, they are one of the founding partners to help protect our winters, the NGO that's looking at how do we really address climate change in winter environs in Canada. Burton, snowboard, Gibbons, they've signed on to B Corp. So this is this intrinsic way of how do we dial our strategic planning, our operations, our processes in a way that reduces the negative environmental and social impacts and really ups the benefits along the way. And again, it's an online platform, there's a help desk, there's a certification process. So not all of this is brand new for people in our own town. Why are they waking up to it? Just a couple of fun stats. 54% of consumers want sustainable food, but they're lacking in knowledge about nutrition and farming. 60% of tourists prefer to stay in places that have eco-friendly accommodation. So we can vote with our dollars in terms of where we want to experience products and services in our work, in our play, in our travels and whatnot. So what's the collective impact of this? I had the responsibility of helping to roll up the numbers, because what gets measured gets managed, and what gets measured and managed can get communicated and reported. And not only with the work that we did with Vancouver 2010, but now with these new instruments that businesses are leaning on, we can now get a better picture of, okay, this was my carbon footprint. I'm now doing reductions. This number is starting to go down, albeit we have to do more, but we're seeing that the methodology is working. When we collaborate with our staff, with our team, with our partners, with community members, we start building trust and affinity. We find opportunities for social inclusion. Even though we're focused on climate action, we're finding ways to bring everybody into the tent. So a whole word, Lucy is very jazzed about social justice, and I think how we weave in doing this right in a way that it benefits all is going to be a mantra, and it's going to be emblematic of the kinds of projects we want to be moving forward. When our staff and our partners are engaged in this, there's a sense of pride. There's a sense of loyalty. It's like, this is my personal value, and I'm able to express my personal value in my work, and that helps people stick. And that helps people feel connected with their organization. And not to mention, that also spurs local economic development. I missed an event last Monday, but I talked to a girlfriend of mine that was Hillary Kilgore, that was at this event Monday night in Vancouver. It was called Bold. Did anybody go to the Bold event? Okay. There's lots of interesting talk on the Twitter feed, Climate Emergency Vancouver, or Bold. Simon Donner, he's a UBC climate scientist, and he said, if we're going to achieve this 1.5 degrees average global warming by 2030, we have to double down on our efforts. And he used this analogy that I thought Whistlerites would get in a heartbeat. This curve has to be more like Sudan Cool War, double black diamond. right? If we're going to achieve that. And that's really where we have to change how we work together to somehow find and achieve those results. This is only one of many sort of placards that we had around the numbers of things that this kind of thinking of applying sustainability to our Olympic and Paralympic Games project generated. So people love numbers. It's really hard for us sustainability people because there's quantitative and qualitative data and who owns what. But it really ended up being a big transcript of the kinds of legacies that we've been able to generate in the Games corridor in Vancouver and Whistler. So that's what we can do within our operations. I want to talk about the one lever that you millennials and you Generation Zs can rock this world with. And us as parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles and favorite friends can support the young ones to try and figure out how do we engage more in the democratic process. Because there's what we can do in our business, in our community, in our province. But some of these problems, we need a national lens where regulation targets large emitters, and we start designing out and penalizing the negative environmental impact generators and start supporting and creating incentives for the positive renewable energy creators. So my stepfather's laughing, and Tony is too, because this is Owen, our eldest, and he voted for the first time this election, which was exciting for our family, and I know others probably have a similar experience. But I think as business and community owners, I know I participated for the first time ever in a climate march. I did too with our kids in Whistler and Vancouver. Greta Thunberg came to Vancouver, and our second youngest wanted to go, and it was like, yeah, and his whole grade 10 class was there. So I think this is something that this becomes advocacy and activism in our business becomes part of what we bridge and what we mentor and what we support in our work. So I'm just nearly at the end here. Next steps for all of us. Internally, we can talk with our colleagues and staff. We can build our own roundtables and say, hey, what do you think? What about? What's possible? We can seek support and training with some of the resources that I've highlighted. Externally, the wonderful world of workshops where we get many brains in the same room to tackle some tough problems is where the ideas and early solutions can start to be celebrated and identified. This is a skill, it is a competency. I think it becomes something that a board, that senior management and that staff need to have in their own DNA as part of how they work in this new decade. It also helps a fantastic way to collaborate and share the workload. I'm just going to toss this up one more time. Oops. Oh no, that came out. Okay, no, that's right. I was going to show you the resources page, but that must have got missed. For any of you that love reading, I read this book in November. It was a game changer for me. Naomi Klein, a Canadian, writes about, the book is called On Fire, The Business Case for the Green New Deal. It's not a bad word, it's an exciting lens. We actually have competency to pull this off. But we have to do this in a far more coordinated way. I met Heather Earlyton. I know, she's read it. Here you go. Anyway, but if you want a book, bedside table that you kind of knock off over this year, I highly recommend this one. And finally, as I mentioned, this decade for me, in my late 50s and for the next 10 years, part of what I want to do is do something amazing with my own community here in Whistler. I've talked to already some early partners, but I want to help generate a positive climate action collaborative where we do things that we think is crazy, slightly extraordinary, probably unprecedented. But I know from my own experience in working with the Olympics that if you put that on your North Star, on your roadmap, all kinds of things happen. The universe conspires and helps you along. So at the moment, I'm naming myself as the contact point, but I'm going to quickly be sharing this with partners that I know that want to be part of it. So if any of you are interested in finding out more and wanting to be a part of this, I invite you to reach out and contact with me. So thank you very much to the Whistler Chamber.